She thought she could park in his driveway whenever she wanted until he had her car towed. Not once, but twice. What happened next? The entire neighborhood couldn't look away. This is a story about boundaries, quiet strength, and how one man's calm resistance reshaped an entire community. Marcus Bell had a gift for patience. He needed it. Teaching seventh grade science to distracted teens in Jacksonville, Florida wasn't exactly peaceful. But at the end of every chaotic day, he returned to his quiet haven, a small single-story brick home with a freshly mowed lawn, wind chimes on the porch, and a driveway just big enough for his aging Camry. He lived alone by choice, a calm life, a steady rhythm. It was a sanctuary where he could sip iced tea, grade papers, and occasionally fall asleep on the couch with the game still on. That peace shattered the day. Colette Sanderson decided his driveway was hers. At first, Marcus didn't mind Colette, his HOA board neighbor from 2 doors down, parked her silver Lexus SUV in his driveway one Saturday afternoon. He figured it was a mistake. Maybe a guest of hers got confused. Maybe they were shuffling cars around. But then it happened again and again. Each time she gave a reason, just dropping something off, running inside for a sec or worse, a wave and a smirk, like he was the unreasonable one for minding Marcus didn't say anything. Not yet, but he started writing everything down. Marcus tried to stay diplomatic. He left a yellow post-it on her windshield. "Please don't park here. Thanks." It vanished by the time he got home from work. Next day, her Lexus was back. So he knocked on her door. Colette answered with a glass of wine in hand, her blonde bob perfectly styled, even in yoga pants and a hoodie that read, "Queen of the Cul-de-sac." "Oh, Marcus," she said, smiling like a game show host. "What's the problem?" "Your car is in my driveway again." "Oh, that," she waved her hand. "I had groceries in the driveway, made it easier." "You don't mind, do you?" "I do," he replied, calm, measured. "Please don't park there again." She rolled her eyes, laughed, and nodded. Okay, no need to get testy. It won't happen again." It did. That week, twice more. And once when he came home late from parent-teacher conferences. There were 2 cars, her Lexus and someone's BMW. His name wasn't on a luxury car, but his name was on the deed to that driveway. Enough was enough. Marcus snapped a picture. Then another. He stood on the sidewalk, staring at his own blocked driveway, furious but focused. This time he didn't knock. He went straight to his phone. He called the HOA the next morning. "Sorry, sir," the woman said, sounding like she'd heard the story 1,000 times. "Unless there's damage, we can't intervene in neighborly disputes. We can maybe send a courtesy email." "A courtesy email," he repeated. "Yes, just reminding her to respect property lines." He hung up. Courtesy emails weren't going to solve this. That evening, Marcus left one final message, black marker on white paper taped directly to her windshield. "Do not park here again. This is your final warning." Predictably, it didn't work. When he returned from work that Friday, her Lexus was there again, parked crooked, not even trying to look accidental. Marcus didn't hesitate. He called the towing company and met the driver outside with the deed in hand. "She's on your property?" the man asked, nodding at the Lexus. Marcus handed him the document. Every inch of it. Within 10 minutes, the tow truck had her SUV lifted onto the rig, and rolling down the street, Marcus folded his arms and watched. Peace didn't return that night, but something else did. Power. An hour later, it came. Bam, bam, bam. His front door shook with pounding fists. Marcus took his time. He adjusted his collar, stretched, and answered slowly. There she was, Colette Sanderson, barefoot in slippers. Silk pajama pants, holding her iPhone like it was a weapon. "Where's my car?" she snapped. "Towed." What I told you not to park there," Marcus replied, tone flat. "You had no right." "Do you know who I am? I'm on the HOA board. I have connections." He blinked. "And I have the deed. It's at Sunshine Towing on Roosevelt Avenue. Have a pleasant night." He shut the door in her face. She screamed, literally screamed. She called the police. But when they arrived, all Marcus had to do was hand over his documents. The officer looked at Colette and said flatly, "Ma'am, he's within his rights." Her face turned red, but Marcus wasn't smiling yet, because in his gut he knew this wasn't the end. She wasn't going to stop. She was going to make this personal. The very next day, the retaliation began. It started with a note taped to his door. Red ink typed in all caps. "This is a community. We must respect our neighbors." He crumpled it and tossed it in the trash. Then came the complaints. His porch ferns were too large, his trash bins were out, 10 minutes past collection. His mailbox color was not up to code. All filed anonymously, of course, but everyone knew who it was. Then one evening as he watered his lawn, a private security SUV rolled up. Lights flashing. "You live here, sir?" the officer asked. Yes. Why we got a report about suspicious activity? Marcus stared at him, then glanced at Colette standing smugly on her porch across the street. Watering the lawn suspicious. He didn't get angry. He didn't shout. He smiled and marched right across the street. Enjoying your little games, he asked calmly. I'm just looking out for the neighborhood, she said, lips pursed. You want a war, Colette, he said, his voice quiet and controlled. You've got one. 1 week later, the battle escalated. Marcus had just finished a morning gym session, protein smoothie in hand, when he turned onto his street and saw it again. Colette's Lexus dead center in his driveway, blocking the garage. This time it wasn't careless. It was calculated. She wanted him to react. She wanted a scene. Instead, Marcus set down his smoothie, took out his phone, and calmly made the call. Hey, it's Marcus Bell again. Same address, same car. The dispatcher laughed. She never learns, huh? Apparently not. 15 minutes later, the tow truck arrived. Marcus greeted the driver with a nod, then sat down in a folding chair on his porch, arms crossed like royalty on a throne. The driver didn't even need direction. He got to work quick, professional, efficient. That's when she came storming out. Robe flapping rage in her eyes, Colette shouted, Stop! What are you doing? The driver barely looked up. Ma'am, this car is illegally parked. Marcus sipped calmly from his water bottle. Not your property, Colette, not your problem. You're being petty, she screamed. I had guests over, there was nowhere else to park. Marcus didn't flinch. You've said that before, and yet here we are, her face turned crimson. You don't understand what you're doing, she hissed, stepping closer. I have connections. I can make life very hard for you. Marcus actually laughed. Oh, Colette, I don't think you understand what's happening here. He stood and pointed toward the street. Your car, it's already gone. She turned just in time to see the tow truck disappear around the corner. The shriek she let out could have shattered glass. You'll regret this, she shouted. No, Marcus replied, cool as ever. You will, she stood frozen. Fists clenched as his family began to arrive for a backyard cookout. His nephews running up the driveway, his sister waving music spilling softly from the backyard speaker. Marcus turned smiling as if nothing had happened, and that infuriated her more than anything. But she wasn't done. Colette didn't know how to lose quietly, and she had one more move left. By Monday morning, the whisper started. A slick, passive-aggressive flyer appeared on every mailbox on the block. Is this the kind of neighborly behavior we want? Do we call tow trucks or show kindness? It was signed by no one, but the font matched Colette's Christmas cards from last year. Then came the email, a neighborhood-wide message from the HOA board, vague language about recent escalations and a concerning lack of community spirit. No names, just enough innuendo to make Marcus look like the villain. But it backfired, because the neighbors knew. Her messages lit up Marcus's phone, saw the flyer, unreal. She tried to find me for my holiday lights last year. Next time I'll split the tow bill with you. Then came the HOA meeting. Normally Marcus wouldn't attend, but this time he wore his best shirt and sat in the front row. Colette entered last, flanked by 2 board members. Posture stiff, like royalty clinging to her throne. But the murmurs in the room, they weren't in her favor, and she knew it. The meeting opened with routine agenda items, budgets, landscaping, updates, mailbox, uniformity. Then a board member cleared her throat. We need to address a formal complaint. Colette straightened in her seat, clearly prepared to play the victim, but the board member continued. This complaint is against Colette Sanderson. Gasped, Colette blinked as if she had misheard. We've received multiple reports of harassment, misuse of HOA resources, unauthorized communications, and retaliatory behavior. That's outrageous, Colette snapped, standing. I'm being targeted. We've also received photographic evidence, the woman continued, including security misuse and trash theft. Colette's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Someone from the back muttered. About time, the board president looked her square in the eye. We're voting on disciplinary action. Effective immediately, Colette. You are removed from the board. The room went still. Marcus didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply nodded. This wasn't revenge. It was justice. 2 days later, Marcus came home to a strange silence. His trash bins were missing. Not misplaced, gone. He walked the neighborhood until he found them stacked neatly behind Colette's garage. He took photos, time-stamped, geotagged. Then he knocked on her door. She answered, makeupless for once, her robe loose, eyes tired. You want to explain this? Marcus asked, holding up the photos. I don't know what you're talking about. I have evidence, he said calmly. You've already lost the HOA. "What's next?" She didn't respond. He took a step forward, voice still steady. "You tried to ruin me, harass me, embarrass me in front of my neighbors." He gestured to her empty porch, "But now you're the one standing alone." She stared at him. No smirk, no defense, just silence. Then she shut the door without another word. The next morning, Marcus filed one final complaint. This time theft. The HOA had no choice. They barred her from committee participation permanently. Her reign was over. Marcus expected Colette to retaliate, maybe another email, maybe more absurd. HOA complaints, but nothing came. No flyers, no warnings, no knock on his door. Instead, for the first time in months, his street felt still, and that silence said more than any rant ever could. But then 3 days later, a sign appeared on her lawn. For sale, it was real. The moving trucks arrived the following week. Marcus watched from his porch, arms folded, as strangers carried box after box out of her once imperial home. Colette didn't wave. She didn't look his way. Not once. And when the truck pulled away for good, the whole cul-de-sac seemed to exhale. The queen was gone. That weekend, something strange happened. A neighbor Marcus had only nodded at before Mr. Klein, the retired Navy vet, walked over with a six-pack of beer. "Appreciate what you did," he said, handing it over. Marcus blinked. For what? For standing up to her. "We've all had problems with Colette for years. You just had the guts to do something." Then came the wave of friendliness. The Johnsons invited him to a backyard barbecue. Mrs. Patel brought him a tin of biryani just because. Even the quiet couple at the end of the block dropped by with a handmade thank you card. For years, Marcus had felt like a ghost in the neighborhood. Polite, respected, but never really included. Now he was part of something, and it felt good. On a quiet Saturday morning, Marcus stepped out to trim his hedges and spotted a young couple touring Colette's old house. They looked early 30s, maybe newlyweds. She pointed at the driveway and said something to her partner. He laughed. Marcus chuckled quietly from his lawn. They seemed decent, hopeful. He wished them better luck than he'd had. Later that afternoon, as he checked his mailbox, he found a small white envelope with no return address. Inside was a single card, 5 handwritten words. "Thanks for taking her down." He didn't recognize the handwriting, but he smiled and slipped the card into his desk drawer. It meant more than whoever wrote it could have known. In the days that followed, Marcus noticed a shift in himself. The house felt warmer. Not in temperature, but in presence, where silence once echoed like loneliness. Now it hummed like peace. His TV felt louder. His meals tasted better. Even the chore of grading student labs didn't feel so heavy. It was as if his world had recalibrated, like his soul had room to stretch again. One night he sat out on the porch, tea in hand, wind chimes swaying gently behind him. A full moon lit the sky. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like he was preparing for a battle. He was simply living. And it was enough. But Marcus hadn't just won his driveway back. He'd reshaped the street. Colette's downfall became a whispered legend. New residents heard the story before they had even unpacked their boxes. She tried to tow everyone who didn't trim their bushes. She once fined a kid for sidewalk chalk. She made people scared to step outside, but not anymore. The HOA, once her personal kingdom, shifted too. New leadership, fairer policies. Community, first mindset. Marcus didn't run for a seat. He didn't need to. His actions had already changed the system from the outside in. He never wanted fame or attention. He just wanted space to breathe. And because he stood up, everyone else could breathe too. A few weeks after the dust had settled, Marcus received a letter from the HOA. But this time it wasn't a complaint. It was a request. They wanted him to speak at the upcoming neighborhood town hall about respectful conflict resolution. At first, Marcus hesitated. He didn't enjoy the spotlight. He didn't see himself as a hero. But something about the invitation felt important. He had spent months being ignored, disrespected, gaslit by someone with power and position. And now that same power structure wanted to listen. So he said yes. On the night of the meeting, the room was full. Young couples, older retirees, single parents, even kids on tablets. And when Marcus stood to speak, the room went silent. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't point fingers. He simply told the story. His story, how small acts of entitlement can slowly chip away at someone's peace. How patience has its limits. How sometimes justice doesn't come from yelling, but from standing tall with calm resolve. He told them about the nights he sat on his couch wondering if he was overreacting, and about the morning he watched a tow truck drive away, knowing it wasn't petty, it was necessary. By the time he finished, no one clapped, they just nodded. Silent agreement, respect, and that was enough. That spring, things in the neighborhood blossomed, not just flowers but relationships. Block parties returned. Neighbors who'd kept to themselves now waved from across yards. The couple who moved into Colette's old house planted sunflowers by the porch. They invited Marcus over for dinner one night just to say thanks. He brought homemade cornbread. It was the beginning of something better. It turned out Colette had ruled by fear, by rules, by whispers. But now without her, the cul-de-sac found something far more powerful, belonging, and Marcus. He finally felt like more than just a homeowner. He felt like part of a home. One afternoon, Marcus stood with a neighbor at the corner of the block, watching a group of kids race scooters down the sidewalk. You ever think, the neighbor said, none of this would have changed if you hadn't done anything? Marcus shrugged. I didn't do that much. The neighbor laughed. And exactly, you didn't yell. You didn't curse. You just stood up. That's what made it work. It struck Marcus, then quiet resistance could be louder than rage. Boundaries didn't need drama to be powerful. He didn't fight to be a hero. He fought because peace mattered. Not just for himself, but for everyone who lived behind a locked front door, too afraid to say, hey, that's not okay. Months later, Marcus came home to find a small package on his doorstep. No label, no sender. Inside was a coffee mug, white ceramic with bold black letters. This driveway is protected by patience and a tow truck. He laughed so hard, he nearly spilled his mail. He placed the mug on his kitchen shelf right beside the old school trophies and the thank you card he still hadn't thrown away. As evening came and the streetlights flickered on, Marcus sat out front watching a new family move in 2 houses down. Kids ran barefoot on the grass. Someone grilled burgers, and for the first time in a long time, Marcus didn't feel like the man who won a war. He felt like the one who ended it. That summer, Marcus found himself mentoring a local teenager named Eli Bright, kid new to the neighborhood and fascinated by science. They met by chance. Eli's basketball rolled into Marcus's yard, and somehow that led to a conversation about Newton's laws and rocket propulsion. Before long, Saturday afternoons became mini science sessions. Marcus didn't realize it at first, but he was slowly becoming something he never expected in that neighborhood, a cornerstone. Not just the man with the famous driveway story, but someone people turned to for advice, for calm, for stability. The man who showed the street how to fight back without fists. One evening, Eli asked him, Mr. Bell, weren't you scared of her? Of the HOA and all that? Marcus paused. Yeah, he said honestly. I was. First, so why'd you do it? He thought for a moment, because being scared of doing the right thing doesn't make it wrong. He handed Eli a screwdriver for their model rocket. Sometimes people like Colette count on you staying silent. That's how they win. You don't need to shout. You just need to stand. Eli nodded, taking it in. The boy didn't say anything more that day, but his eyes said it all. A lesson had landed. Fall rolled in with golden leaves and quiet evenings. Marcus's life returned to normal, but it wasn't the same. He noticed things, like how new HOA flyers were now written in clear, respectful language, how more neighbors showed up to meetings, how disagreements didn't spiral but led to conversations. Marcus hadn't burned the system down. He hadn't overthrown anything. He had just nudged it, hard enough for people to wake up, and in doing so, he gave others permission to speak too. Colette's tyranny was over. But more importantly, a new kind of community had begun. One day, Marcus passed by the community bulletin board and saw a child's drawing pinned to the cork. It was of a man standing proudly beside a house, arms folded, smiling. Above it were the words in shaky handwriting, "My hero, Mr. Bell." He stared at it for a long time. It wasn't about ego. It wasn't about glory. It was about the realization that small actions ripple, that boundaries once drawn with grace and firmness become maps for others to follow. He left the drawing untouched, but he returned the next day with a new pushpin, just to make sure it never fell. On the 1-year anniversary of the first tow, Marcus sat on his porch, same chair, same view. The street was quiet, peaceful, not silent but alive. Children laughing, a radio playing in the distance, a lawnmower humming somewhere nearby. He looked at his driveway, perfectly clear. No Lexus, no battle, just space. It reminded him of something simple. Freedom isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet reassurance of knowing you stood your ground and the world didn't end. Sometimes it's the joy of watching your neighbors feel a little braver because you dared to be first. Sometimes it's just a clean driveway on a sunny day, and sometimes that's everything. You don't have to shout to be heard. Sometimes standing your ground quietly is the loudest thing you can do. People who abuse power often count on your silence. But when you draw the line with dignity and resolve, you inspire others to do the same. Respect isn't something you are given. It's something you claim with calm, with courage, and with consistency.